It's no secret that everyone seeks attention and validation from others to some extent. Evidently, the extent of this desire varies from person to person, but generally speaking, individuals prefer to be well liked by others, or in the very least, they wish to avoid being perceived as abrasive, repulsive, and contemptible to the point where nobody can tolerate their presence. Today's social media-dominated world has only heightened the desire to be well liked because the platforms themselves and their algorithms fuel validation-seeking behaviors. Chasing the greatest number of likes or followers and doing anything for internet clout naturally comes to mind. Social media aside, being well liked and/or respected certainly facilitates beneficial outcomes. On the flip side, not being well liked and/or respected can also facilitate negative outcomes. So, should you aim to be well liked or respected, or perhaps a bit of both? Today's discussion explores this question by examining the nature of being well liked versus being respected. I will perform this endeavor by analyzing the rationale for both states, which will evidently reveal their benefits and drawbacks, before I ultimately compare them to one another. The conclusions I draw will also factor in observations from personal experience, both in terms of what I've directly experienced and what I've observed in others. To begin, I'm going to depart from my usual style. Instead of going straight to definitions, I'll open with a story, one that sets the stage and proves to be rather conducive to the insights I'll present later. The setting of this story is at the start of high school, grade 9. I remember wandering the halls, gradually figuring out where everything was and fully adjusting to my new environment within a few weeks. In the midst of all that, new social cliques were beginning to form and existing ones became further solidified, barring a few changes here and there. The old clique that I ran with in middle school and subsequently disavowed once that chapter concluded evidently persisted into high school. Throughout high school, I witnessed and/or heard about others who attempted to join this group or gain their approval in some manner. One of those people attempted to do just that at the start of grade 9. I didn't classify him as a friend, more like a well-known acquaintance from hockey. Nevertheless, we would chat from time to time. I recall arriving to school one day after a weekend and hearing about what this acquaintance had done. Essentially, he hosted a party at his place and everyone from the old clique that I ran with was invited. Plenty of alcohol was at this party, unsurprisingly, and he became quite inebriated in an attempt to impress the attendees. When asked why he hosted the party, provided the alcohol, and became heavily intoxicated, in addition to fully acknowledging that the popular clique members were exploiting his desire to hang out with them for alcohol, among other things, his reply was this: "Even if they expect that I provide alcohol and host parties at my place, I don't really care as long as I can hang out with them and be a part of that group." I vividly recall being dumbfounded by his response because it invoked a profound question in my mind. Why would people go to such lengths to be liked, accepted, or recognized by others, even if they have to sacrifice their self-respect and personal pride to do so? This event also compelled me to recall my own experience with that group, and although I didn't go to the same lengths to hang out with them, I saw myself in this acquaintance. I saw what I could have become if I didn't choose to disavow this self-proclaimed and self-recognized farce of a popular group. Over the next 4 years, this acquaintance continued to hang out with this group, and I heard of new occurrences that resembled the original. He was able to hang out with them, but it's clear that he wasn't truly respected by the other members, comparable to how I wasn't respected by them in middle school. Observing this acquaintance furthered my resolve and cemented the fact that I made the right decision to leave them all behind and focus on my self-development. Embracing my solitary nature by rejecting vainglorious people, shunning the need for validation or acceptance from others, and rejecting groups in general was without a doubt the best decision I made during those years, and I absolutely have no regrets about it. The only regret, as I mentioned in previous videos, is that I wish I had done it sooner. I wish I had woken up to my foolishness and left that group sooner. No use dwelling on it though. That's all in the past, and it's best to leave it there, where it belongs. Before I venture into the in-depth insights and analysis, I will proceed to define key terms. Fundamentally, what does it mean to like, to be well liked, and to be respected? Referencing Merriam-Webster yet again, there are multiple definitions for some of these terms. As such, I've chosen the most relevant definitions or interpretations. Like is defined in the following ways. Quote, to feel toward, regard, to wish to have, want, to feel inclined, choose, prefer, approve, and to be something that one likes. End quote. Meanwhile, well-liked is defined as, quote, liked by many people, end quote. No surprise there, but what about respect? It's defined as, quote, to consider worthy of high regard, esteem, to refrain from interfering with, to have reference to, concern, end quote. It would be redundant to define esteem since its definition is essentially analogous to respect. Anyhow, it's clear that to like, in this context, means you approve of something or someone. Furthermore, you desire to obtain something or someone, or you choose/prefer that something or someone over others. A well-liked person, then, is someone whose company is actively welcomed, enjoyed, preferred, and sought by others. Meanwhile, respect in the context of today's discussion implies that a person is held in high regard by others. This, in turn, means that other people respect their opinions, show concern for them, and think carefully about how they treat them. With the terms defined, I'll proceed to examine the rationale for why people desire to be well-liked and its advantages. As mentioned in the introduction, everyone desires a certain level of attention and validation from others. We want to be seen, heard, and feel that we truly matter or are worthy of consideration, especially from the people we care about, such as family, friends, and significant others. When this is lacking, there's a strong proclivity to satisfy the inherent desire for validation through other sources, social media being an obvious example. Furthermore, we desire to be well liked by others because this is perceived as a method to stave off social isolation and loneliness. Although a fair number of people can tolerate and even prefer solitude, another large segment of the population cannot tolerate it. The mere idea of having no social life, being totally isolated, alone, or left behind, terrifies them. As such, they'll do what's necessary to keep others around, and if this entails sacrificing their self-respect, then so be it. In their minds, having to sacrifice a bit of self-respect to keep others around is a small price to pay compared to the alternative, that of suffering crippling feelings of loneliness and despair. At this point, you might object and say, there's no guarantee that someone's loneliness will be alleviated by having others around, irrespective of whether it's family, friends, significant others, or acquaintances. Indeed, you're correct in making those comments, and I'll expand on them soon enough. In the meantime, the counterpoint to those remarks is that even if individuals acknowledge them, as in, they realize that those remarks are true, their emotional side doesn't want to believe it. Why? Because it's easier to believe that others will alleviate their loneliness compared to believing that they must, first and foremost, be content with themselves before their loneliness can be alleviated. This line of thinking frequently causes people to desire a relationship for the sake of escaping loneliness, even if it's all in their mind, an illusion. The unfortunate fact is that the illusion eventually becomes reality when given enough time. Despite the dangers that can arise with striving to be well-liked, such as sacrificing self-respect and becoming deluded to the point where you're no longer in touch with reality, it's evident that being well-liked by others possesses some advantages. For example, if people like you and prefer your company, then this will facilitate the expansion of your network. Regarding your professional career, how well you network can be the difference between securing a high-paying job at a desirable company versus a lower-paying job at a mediocre company. A similar phenomenon tends to arise for dating and relationships because being well-liked improves your prospects, or odds of being successful. A simple example will demonstrate this point. Let's say you have roughly a 50-50 chance that you'll go on more than a few dates with someone and a serious relationship will arise from those dates. If there's only one person, or prospect, in your social network where this could feasibly occur, then the stakes are quite high, essentially all or nothing. But if you know, say, 5 to 10 people where this could feasibly occur, then the odds of success are evidently much better. Now, having more prospects doesn't automatically guarantee success, but you're certainly in a better position compared to someone with very little or no options because, once again, circumstances are more likely to work out if you have more options to choose from, rather than less. With all that said, it's time to examine the drawbacks of striving to be well-liked. The most evident drawback is this pursuit having a robust tendency to occur at the expense of self-respect and respect from others. In other words, if you're well-liked but you aren't respected, then it's essentially guaranteed that you'll be treated as a doormat or exploited by others in some manner. For example, perhaps you're well-liked because you don't call out people's problems and flaws. Maybe your family members and friends like you because you listen to their problems, but you don't criticize their behavior or demonstrate how they're the architects of their misfortunes because you don't want to disturb the peace. You don't want to metaphorically stir the pot, even though it's probably better to do so in the long run. Perhaps you're well-liked because you always say yes, and you're afraid to say no, or you refuse to stand up for yourself. This causes your boss to keep assigning you extra work, and even though it isn't directly related to your portfolio, you don't protest because you want to keep your job. In this case, you'd be well-liked by your boss, but you're certainly not respected. Because these situations occur, this drives many to conclude that you should aim to be respected rather than well-liked. Others may like you, but if they don't respect you, then they'll abuse you, especially if you allow it to happen without consequence. On the flip side, someone who's respected but not necessarily well-liked will still be treated decently because they're far less likely to be taken advantage of or played a fool. For example, employees may not like their boss at a given company because the boss sets high standards, but if the employees respect their boss, then they'll adhere to those standards and follow their lead. The employees will put in a good day's work and be professional, because if they don't, then there will be justifiable penalties, especially if the boss is actually a good boss, someone who truly cares and leads by example. Great leaders aren't necessarily liked by everyone, but if they're well respected, then people will naturally follow them. Meanwhile, if a boss is well liked but not respected, then the employees are sure to slack off or be disrespectful in some manner, especially if they know they can get away with it. Aiming to be respected instead of liked is perceived as the better option for many because if they set boundaries, uphold a set of principles, and aren't afraid to stir the pot, then other people realize that they shouldn't be trifled with. They know not to backstab, exploit, or perform some other injustice against this person because there will be hell to pay. Enemies, despite opposing ideals, sometimes show more respect than people who are supposedly friends, family, or significant others. Indeed, and this is why betrayal is so devastating because you expect an enemy to harm you, but not someone whom you trust and even love. To conclude, should you aim to be well-liked or respected? The conclusion I've come to is that although possessing both traits is ideal and feasible, you should ultimately aim to be respected before you even consider attempting to be well-liked. Why? The answer is simple, because not everyone is going to like you, and even the people who like you aren't going to do so at every moment, or to the same degree. Even if you're the kindest person out there, some people will hate you merely for the fact that you exist. This frequently occurs when people are jealous of your success or your character, how you're able to carry yourself, and weather life's calamities. Look at Jesus, Son of the living God, the Messiah, sinless and perfect. Yet, despite those facts, the Pharisees still hated him, not to mention because he called out their BS and false righteousness. If Jesus, despite being sinless and perfect, can be hated, then what about us? We're fundamentally flawed, and even though we can attempt to be as likable as possible, others can and certainly will dislike us, for one reason or another. So, if aiming to be respected is preferable, how then should this be performed? Start by disassociating from people who clearly don't give a damn about you. Even if you're afraid of being alone or isolated, having to venture on your own is far better than enduring persistent abuse by malicious people. Next, strive for peace, but don't uphold a false peace that's enforced through fear and a culture of silence. If there's behavior or a problem that needs to be addressed, don't turn a blind eye and hope things get better. Problems, as we know, tend to get worse if they're allowed to fester, not better. Finally, have a set of principles you'll actually adhere to, even if this causes friction between you and other people. If you've thought everything through and arrived at your conclusions in a logical manner, then they'll respect you, even if they don't openly admit it. Great figures and leaders are remembered not simply because they were liked by those who favored them, but rather they're remembered because their actions elicited respect from allies and enemies alike. If you extract nothing else from this discussion but one thing, take away that you should aim to become a person that you, and the people who actually care about you, can respect, admire, and classify as a positive example that's worth emulating. Because at the end of the day, those people and their opinions are the only ones that truly matter. Thank you for taking the time to watch. If you enjoyed today's video, please consider subscribing.